guest in the segment, Steve Pearson, a West Virginia Independent Observer. Good morning, Steve. Thank you for coming in.
Good morning. All this number talk is makes me feel like I'm sitting at the Jefferson County Commission.
Which is a much more pleasant experience now than it was a couple of years ago in regards to numbers balancing.
Well, we can get into that.
Being found.
We can get into that later. But yeah, so you guys wanted to talk about Jefferson County today, I understand?
Yeah, well, that would be why you're here,
That's
sir.
why you're here,
Right.
Steve.
Okay. I figured there was something up.
Yeah. Hey, when Pasha Majdi, the commission president, Kara Keys, who's one of the members of the commission, were in last time, we talked about this transition in the buildings, that the old American Public University System buildings that are now potentially going to be taken over by Jefferson County government. They made that sound like that would be a fairly smooth transition from building to building. How is that going in relation to Charlestown?
Well, you're obviously you want to set this up as a fight because that's
no.
But I mean,
I'm not baiting you
bring
here.
Charlestown because it's not. Really, it's a county issue. I mean, the county has this motley collection of buildings, and they need to either fix them up, or move. And when I say motley, I mean when you look at some of these buildings, that you go down the street on Washington Street, and they look nice, but if you go around the back, you can see that they're quite a hodgepodge, of little. It's like building sheds and connecting buildings and metal staircases on the outside to get egress, and bricked up windows, and when you go inside, they're also rabbit warrens, and that's what came out. And this is not a new issue, the issue for the county is the longer you stay in these buildings, the more expensive they are to maintain.
Sure.
And when you talk about a building that was built in 1900, it's not going to be very energy efficient. If you look closely at the courthouse, that was built in the 1800s, you can see that it has a chimney, like a wood burning stove chimney coming out of the back of it, right? So when the judges, you talked about the qualifications, probably the judge was obligated to bring them a certain amount of firewood back in the 1800s to heat the courtroom. Right, or maybe they traded, a discount on the sentence if you were able to bring some firewood.
Law degree optional, extra firewood helps.
Chopping the firewood, yeah. And so, what we're really the situation we're in as a county is we've been living rent free in those buildings for decades, because we haven't been paying the maintenance. It's been deferred. That's pretty obvious. And so, like anything else, it kind of builds up. And so, the county, found itself in a situation where it's too expensive, or more expensive than it should be to stay in these buildings. But then it's, there's not a lot of good opportunities to just move into like a, perfectly sized building. So they have what is available, which is the two buildings that APUS was, trying to get rid of.
APUS,
American Public University, right? Because after the pandemic, or during the pandemic, they went to a virtual model and realized that that was more profitable than bringing all these people in.
Mm-hmm.
They really have they've continued to grow. It's a very successful company, but they don't need this physical space, and they have a lot of it in Charlestown. If you were to walk around Charlestown, that was a former APUS building, that one. And so they invested a lot.
Any idea what the total square footage is, Steve?
Well, for the two buildings that the county is looking at, it's 135,000 square feet. And so, part of this was required. The court system is expanding, and the Supreme Court said we need modern court facilities. And that is one of the issues with the current setup. You've got holding cells in one building, a court in another building across the street. You've got three different entrances that you have bailiffs at and magnetometers. So moving to one new facility, you can even just see the immediate reduction is like, well, we'll just have one entrance, one set of bailiffs that can control the entry. We don't have to have extra bailiffs to help block the street while we move, defendants, back and forth. And overall, it's just a much more secure and controlled environment to have it all in one building.
Steve, Berkeley County a few years ago had the same challenge you're saying in Jefferson County, and I'm giving a lot of credit to Ron Collins and Deborah Hamlin. They proceeded to sell a lot of these, and use your term, motley buildings, to consolidate into 3 or 4 buildings. And so I think it's a smart move for the future. Do you have any at all the price tag of conversion to these two buildings?
Well, that is the number that the county is using is $35 million to acquire the 2 buildings, and that includes purchasing them for about 23, and then renovating them. The bulk of the renovation, about 75–80% of it, is in the smaller building, the one that has the clock on it for the courthouse facility, because you need things like bulletproof glass in every window, and security systems, and holding cells. This is not just a matter of throwing up some 2x4s and drywall. So they're pegging that at about $9 million. So the purchase price is $7 million, and they're going to renovate for $9 million. The county did look at the cost of just building a new building, and that number was like $35 million just by itself for a courthouse. So one of the things that they're going to end up with a lot of leftover space. Immediately, they're going to have a lot of space on Washington Street as they want to move the county administration facilities out, and then they're going to have more space on George Street, because that's where the St. Margaret's building and the old jail are. So it's a lot more space that's going to be available. One of the things I didn't see in the process was it's really been focusing on the Washington Street properties right now. That's what I think Pasha and
yes,
Kara were in here, and they were talking about with the city of Charlestown. It's all about the Washington Street part, between the courthouse and then out to up the street towards the library, where the Hunter House ends at that block, and that's all the county administration buildings. If you go down George Street, it's mostly court functions in St. Margaret's with the tax office, but they haven't started talking about those buildings yet.
Now, in times past, as recently a couple so years ago, when you had a major renovation effort, your first thought was write grants, get money to supplement what you get other means. The grants are drying up in many cases. Have you heard any discussion at all of how they're going to develop a revenue stream?
No, and that's that question has been coming up. Is can the county afford this? And so I think at a high level, you're talking about a county that has a current revenue budget between $30 and $40 million a year. And when I say current revenue, it's not counting the money that sort of you always roll money forward. And we're just now starting to see the uptick in property taxes from this sort of boom in residential building, which is going to grow that over time. And maybe we'll get some data center money. But
I was going to say the data centers are the key to it all.
Well,
right?
not necessarily. I think because one, those are many years out in the future. Because remember, your property taxes, it takes a couple of years for them to kick in, and if you don't build those things, so we're probably 5 to 6 years away from seeing any meaningful number on that. And it's TBD on. Right now they look very positive from a revenue standpoint, but there's always a history of the state doing inducements and property tax reductions and salvage valuation. So the actual revenues that go to the counties may fluctuate, and the legislature may change those percentages again. That was one of the debates that came up, is that property taxes are very regular. You can build a local government on it, and the state now taking that away and adjusting that formula, you could see wide swings, depending on what the legislature and the governor feel is appropriate for the state. Yeah. But your original question was, can the county afford it? And so, in a large sense, the county can afford it. The real question is, what does the county have to give up? And what does it have to prioritize? What else gets squeezed out of the budget? If there's not enough new revenue to support this, or what kind of other fees or taxes have to be raised to support this. And I don't think that's a conversation that you hear a lot out of the electeds at this point.
I was going to say, you've couched it in an interesting way right now. You've couched it plus and minuses, but I've not heard any discussion at all on the minus aspect of it. Have you heard anything on the underbrush?
Well, there's just a lot of questions, and what if you listen to what the commissioners are saying, what the staff's saying, they don't know the numbers. That's what is at the rub, or the center of this discussion that they're having, or not having with Charlestown, is the county commission says we don't know the budget yet for this building. We know what it's costing, but we don't have all the numbers about where the expenses are going to be. Like, what's the interest rate? So how much debt? We're going. We know how much debt we're taking on. We don't know how much it's going to cost us. We want to get impact fees to cover some of this stuff, but we don't know what the impact fees are going to be because they're now on their third iteration of this impact fee study. We want to sell these buildings. They've thrown out numbers like $5 million they want to sell the buildings for, but we don't know what they're worth, and we don't know, if there's a buyer. So,
especially if they need a lot of repair.
Right, and they've already said they need a lot of repair. And so that's kind of the mismatch that's happening between Charlestown. Charlestown would like to take these for we don't want them, we just want them, and we want to bring in a developer and develop. And the county's saying, well, no, we might need to actually get some money off of these things to help buy down the cost of this new building. Otherwise, we're going to have to raise taxes, or we're going to have to cut funding for other services. So that whole, the devil is in the details here. They know the top line number, but they don't know the constituent pieces of how they're going to fund this thing.
Is there any concern, especially with the courthouse in and of itself? I mean, it has such historic value that, I can't imagine that there's not a group out there saying, you can't stop using this courthouse. It was John Brown's.
That absolutely is out there in the community. It's a big concern about that, that courthouse, wanting to see it preserved, whether it's as a museum or as a working, functioning building. And I
think they said they wanted to talk to the Department of Tourism about that. Did they not?
Well, they want to talk to it was thrown out during one of the commission meetings that they're hoping that the federal Department of Interior would take it on as a national park, but that's a very long term.
I was going to say the problem with that is approximately 50 other counties have the same issue.
And that's just West Virginia.
That's just in West Virginia, exactly right.
Yeah.
We in Berkeley County have a similar issue. Yeah. You could never get rid of that historical courthouse, so you've got to find a way to utilize it. And all these old buildings cost a lot of money to renovate and bring up to current standards.
Yeah. But it depends. So I do have some experience in rehabilitating buildings. So it depends on what you want to do with it.
That's true.
Yeah.
No, and as a private investor, and so one of the things that really didn't get looked at it. So the courthouse is no longer functional as a courthouse, but is it functional for other purposes, like county administration purposes? So we talked a little bit about the Washington Street buildings, the George Street buildings. One of the things I didn't see in this process is, they moved to acquire the administrative building first, and then the courthouse. But they didn't. If they looked at move the courthouse, that would then free up space in the Washington Street buildings, and I didn't see any analysis of whether any of the existing buildings on George Street, the Margaret's building or the jail, would be suitable for county administrative functions, and whether they actually needed the second building, or could they have just done the first building and somehow repurposed the courthouse for county functions, because it has a lot less security issues, and certain functions don't need the public accessibility. Certainly, it has a nice meeting room where Judge Hammer currently holds court. I mean, I think the county commission will look pretty grand if they were meeting up in there. But so, these are big projects. It is, the thing I'm hearing in the community is they feel it's been a little bit rushed. I know that, the discussion has been going on for years, but not in a detailed fashion. It's more like, we need to do this, but we're not doing it now.
Hey, I want to come back to a couple of things that you said in this half hour here. One was that the impact fees aren't settled yet. And we talked to Kara and Pasha, it sounded like they had wound up around $11,000, and they had the division of that $11,000 down between the different categories. Is that not fact?
No. The report that they were looking on, I think, was that was the second report, which has been superseded by the third report.
When did the third report come out, Steve?
I got the draft over the weekend.
Oh, what does this one say?
Still analyzing it. Actually, I sent some questions off to the county administrator because it's saying it's stretching it out over 20 years. So the number's about the same, but the amount per year is about half. And there's different methodologies, to use a big word, that you can use for calculating these impact fees. You can do a plan, you can do cost recovery, you can do incremental. So each report has used a different methodology, which in and of itself, it's like, well, okay, we're changing this again, which tells me that they're trying to figure this out. They don't have a good handle on which one they want to use, and they're using a consultant that advises them on this, and he's obviously telling them which one they should use. So in the course of 6 months, it's evolved, and so right now what the draft I think is showing somewhere around $400,000 a year available to offset the debt, but they're talking about the interest at the current rate would be about 1.3 million. So there's still a big amount of that interest that's going to need to be covered out of other revenues.
Now, to clarify, you said that it looks like draft 3 is about half of the recommended impact fees of draft 2
per year.
Because it stretched out the number of years.
They went from 10 years to 20 years on how they would be allocating those impact fees.
All right. Now, the next part of that is in regards to the use of the impact fees to offset the cost of these buildings.
Yes.
We're told that impact fees are directed, targeted, specific to certain items. How would they be able to redirect this money toward the purchase of the courthouse?
So the methodology is basically it's cost recovery. So it's similar to what they did. They have a mortgage, for example, on their ESA building. So you have a building, it's built anticipated future demand. So you divide up the share of current demand and future demand, and each of those groups pays their proportional amount to cover this thing that you need to build now, so that you'll have it over the next 20 years as this growth moves into it. It's like soccer fields. You can add a soccer field as you grow, but if you need a firehouse or you need a county administration building, you can't wait till you get the growth and then build it. You need it ahead of time. So that's the methodology they're using right now.
And is there a rainy day fund? I mean, does the county have money in its coffers at least to start this process?
Well, that's the capital improvement, and yes, they said they put aside about $18 million, so that's fully spoken for.
Okay.
And what it appears that will deplete the entire capital improvement plan, because there were some issues that came up with. They were talking about wanting to buy some more ambulances. They had this 10-year replacement cycle a couple months ago, and that said, well, we got to pull back on that because we don't have the free money or cash that's set aside. It's all being directed to the building, where we had a big pot before. The pot's not available. But again, $35 million. Even if you got $18 million in cash, you're still halfway across the river.
Yeah. We hear the term "the devil's in the detail," but in this particular case, Steve, the devil to me sounds like it's in the process. You don't change the conditions this late in the process. I'm surprised that you got over the weekend a version number 3. We should be past the version number 3.
I can't disagree with you on process there. I mean, that is, I think that's one of the things that I hear in the community is that, and to Maria's point, it's like, well, did you saved up for this, right? You want to go out and buy this. You've saved up. You've got a plan for it, and the plan we seem to be developing the plan after we've made the agreement to buy the buildings.
Well, yeah, buying the building's one thing. The impact fee study is something altogether different. We have been working on this for quite a while, and I had the impression both Jefferson and Berkeley County were very close to approving it and saying start making the distribution. But what you're saying in Jefferson County, that's not the case.
No, it's just in this one aspect, because Jefferson County's had impact fees for many years, and for schools, for law enforcement, for parks and recs, for EMS services, and for county administration facilities is this little chunk that they're talking about. Not little, it's a fairly big chunk. So all the rest of them have they went through the process. This is just trying to figure out what impact fees can be used to fund these new buildings, and the challenge they've had is initially they tried to analyze what they were replacing. So basically the incremental cost, and that seems to be they don't really know how much space they have, because that's one of the things that's changed is the square footage of some of the buildings that they have changed pretty significantly from the second report to the third report. So the courthouse went from 18,000 square feet to 12,000 square feet. The 12,000 square feet is the accurate number, but somewhere along the line, they didn't actually measure what they were replacing.
And Steve, I need to we only have a minute left here.
Okay, clarification. I think you confused me, and I may have confused others with my question. When you talk about
impact fees confuse everybody.
Okay, what you're talking about over the weekend was dealing only. The impact fees that dealt with the acquisition of this property. Is that correct?
Correct.
Only that.
Only that. Okay. Everything else is settled. It's been through the public hearings. It's all good.
I have 30 seconds left. Is there a Sidewinder update?
Well, I was going to do a call out to the Jefferson County ROTC program. They had 6 students who won appointments to the military academies, an additional 3. They got appointments to the prep school. So that's unheard of. Typically, it's 2 to 3 a year. So
6 is impressive.
That's like Jefferson County has 15% of the service academy appointments from the state of West Virginia.
Good to catch up with you, Steve. Thanks for coming in. Steve Pearson with the West Virginia Independent Observer. We are back with more after these. This is Talk Radio, WRNR Martinsburg, and TV 10.